Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
ABC Wednesday, Shifting Gears is back.
He has arisen.
Tim Allen and Kat Dennings return in television's #1 new comedy.
What?
With a star-studded premiere including Jenna Elfman, Nancy Travis, and...
Hey, buddy!
a big home improvement reunion.
Welcome.
Oh, boy.
That guy's a tool.
Shifting Gears, season premiere Wednesday, 8/7 Central on ABC, and stream on Hulu.
The following podcast contains...
What the f*** you do that for? Hey! That was... Don't squeal. What are we? Werewolves, not squirrels.
explicit language.
Hello, pod friends. It's me, Dave. And if you're hearing my voice before you hear me insult Gavin, you know that means it's rerun time. Not that you should complain. You get 2 shows for the price of 1, and since the shows are free, you're pretty much getting your money's worth. This is from our Spooktacular 2020, and it's all about the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident back in the 80s. It's one of the most famous UFO incidents ever. Even more information has come to light in the 5 years since I've recorded this, and none of it has changed my mind on what happened. So sit back, put on your tinfoil hats, and let's talk.
Aliens. Aliens from space.
Well, I don't know why you're getting an attitude about it, Gavin. I mean, you guys just needed America to protect you from the Germans and the scary Russians. No need to be snotty. Ass.
The following podcast contains...
profanity, food jokes, and tired comedy references.
explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you were so bored on the back gate you started a UFO flap, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 284. There's a light over at the Rendlesham place, part 1 of the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident, where we're talking about the Roswell of Great Britain, part of Spooktacular 2020. Stay tuned. Hey, the What the Hell Are You Thinking podcast is brought to you by the Suffolk Lighthousekeeper Academy, training the next generation of lighthouse keepers. Have you ever wanted to live in a spooky old tower on the edge of the water, bit of a night owl, and like big lights? Then you should be a lighthouse keeper. The Suffolk Lighthousekeeper Academy has been training keepers for over 300 years, and the key skills are lighting the lamp, turning off the lamp, making sure the lamp spins, and how to deal with the crushing loneliness that comes with being a lighthouse keeper. Maybe you don't like people. Maybe you're cursed by a witch to live alone. Maybe you just like creepy old buildings and fog. And why not turn that into a life alone in a bloody lighthouse? Act now and we'll include a free foghorn tuning class. The Suffolk Lighthousekeeper Academy. Best do it now before they finish automating a lot of them.
A security police patrol on the perimeter of the base saw what they thought was an aeroplane crashing into the forest. They went into the forest to investigate, they saw a cluster of strange lights that they seemed to move away as they went towards them. And eventually they came across a clearing in the forest, and they actually saw what one of them described as a triangular-shaped object on legs. They saw this thing suddenly disappear in the blink of an eye, which is how they described it. The following morning, British police officers were called to the scene. They couldn't find anything to show that there'd been anything unusual there, but there were strange markings on the ground, damage to trees, and radiation apparently that had been left at the scene. A couple of nights later, these mysterious lights reappeared. The deputy base commander, Colonel Charles Holt, was sort of like dragged out of the party to go into the woods again with a team of hand-picked men to go and investigate. And while he was there, he actually saw a UFO, well, as he described it at the time, a brilliant pulsating light moving through the trees, and he saw other lights beaming down to the ground on the base, and he couldn't explain this.
I'm going to let you in on a little military secret. Unless you're actually in combat, being in the military is really fucking boring. The vast majority of the time is spent waiting for shit to happen and hoping that it never does, because in a lot of jobs, if shit is happening...
Something obviously has gone very wrong.
Maybe not if you're a filing clerk in an orderly room, but say you're a guard at a nuclear base. You flat do not want to hear you are urgently needed to fulfill your primary mission, keeping people from stealing said nuclear weapons. I know from experience, my first 2 assignments were at nuclear bases, and those 4 years, my job consisted almost entirely of trying to stay awake on night shifts. Air Force cops used a lot of different methods to stay awake, because the consequences of falling asleep on post was that you would be...
You're in deep shit.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in the extremely unlikely event someone got to the nukes, that was bad, but honestly, the security's so redundant, that's just never gonna happen. No, I mean, you're in deep shit if you were caught asleep on post by your sergeant. Nuke bases took falling asleep very seriously, and if you did it on the right post and the right time, your military career is about to come to a very premature end. So you drank a lot of coffee, you smoked a lot of cigarettes, you dipped a lot of chewing tobacco, you shot the shit with your buddies, you walked in tiny circles, you sang at the top of the voice, and if all else failed...
I used to masturbate. Constantly.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if you're really fighting off the sleepies, a quick toss in the dark is a surefire way to wake you up. But sometimes, just sometimes, even a work jerk isn't enough to fight back the Z-Monster, and you have to resort to extreme measures to get the blood moving, and maybe to get some company to come out to keep you awake. One of the ways you could theoretically do that, I mean, I certainly never did it.
He did. He totally did.
Was to say that you saw something. Maybe there were shadows on the fence line or lights on the perimeter, and that would get someone sent out to look for it. And if you made it vague enough, you could eat up a good hour of your shift, maybe get a coffee break when it was over, and you would be saved. Which brings me to our topic, the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident back in 1980. Back during the Cold War, the United States had military bases all over Europe. Some were considered plum assignments close to exciting nightlife and large cities filled with people to have sex with. But others...
not so much.
RAF Bentwater and its sister base RAF Woodbridge were definitely in the not-so-much categories. Located about 80 miles from London and Suffolk on the Channel coast, Bentwaters and Woodbridge were considered gloomy, cold shitholes of an assignment. Originally opened as an RAF fighter base back in 1943, the U.S. Air Force took it over in 1951, and the base played host to a variety of aircraft, but in 1980, its primary mission was to stop Soviet tanks coming through the Fulda Gap into Germany with A-10 tank killer aircraft, and failing that, to drop tactical nuclear weapons on them. That last bit was very much an open secret, but kinda non-denial denied.
I can neither confirm nor deny details.
Every base with nuclear weapons is far more strict with its security measures for good reasons, and overseas bases were widely considered the worst assignments by Air Force security police when there were nukes present. I mean, if you were going to spend your entire tour training constantly and being inspected regularly, speaking from experience...
It's fucking tedious, this shit.
None of the cops I knew in my time in the military station at Bentwaters or Woodbridge had a good thing to say about it. But that's not unusual for any nuke base in general. What was unusual about Bentwaters was the UFO.
That? Yes. That.
The 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident is considered the most widely documented sighting in the UK. With highly credible witnesses and documentation, it is considered a Roswell-level incident by the kind of people who like to qualify and quantify UFO sightings.
The nerds, the dweebs, the spazzes.
And it all starts on the back gate the morning after Christmas, Boxing Day, 1980, at 3 a.m. Airman First Class John Burroughs was patrolling in the vicinity of the closed back east gate of RAF Woodbridge. He saw strange colored lights descending into Rendlesham Forest just outside the base. Now, he used the word patrolling, which is the safe and professional way to say he was fucking off far away from the prying eyes of his flight chief, the supervisor in charge of the shift. It was the day after Christmas, 3 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't there, but I would wager any amount of money that Airman First Class Burroughs was sitting at the gate shack, catching on a nap, or fucking doing some other non-vital mission-related duty. According to his statement at the time, when he and his partner saw the lights descending into the thick woods, they thought it might be an airplane that had crashed. As airplanes do, in the middle of the night off the Channel coast of England, when the Air Force base nearby was shut down for flight ops and in very tightly controlled airspace.
Chillingly plausible.
He radioed for assistance, and Staff Sergeant Jim Pennison and Airman First Class Ed Cabinsack responded to the gate to investigate. This is where things get weird. I will read now from a memo written by Lieutenant Colonel Edward Halt, the Deputy Base Commander for Bentwaters regarding the incident, and I will be mentioning Colonel Halt rather a lot, so stay with us. Quote, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed the 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsing red light on top and a bank of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later near the back gate, unquote. Now, you might be asking yourself, why the second in command of a U.S. military base is writing a letter about some crazy bullshit like this? Doesn't he have better things to do?
Apparently not.
Why take any of this seriously? Let me tell you, first of all, about something called the Personnel Reliability Program. Air Force cops guard nuclear weapons. They have access to nuclear weapons in their storage area and even a limited form of access to the weapons themselves. So, the Air Force thought it would be a good idea to know if the kind of people who had such close access to nuclear weapons were
quite sane.
Or if you had a drug or alcohol problem or financial liabilities or displayed some emotional instability, your PRP would be pulled and you would at best be reassigned from your duties and much more likely discharged. So, these cops carried the presumption of being reliable, honest, and rational. This isn't Farmer Toad of Suffolkshire seeing lights in his old bin. These are trusted people, one of whom a non-commissioned officer with several years of experience, so Colonel Halt took these reports seriously. Honestly, probably more seriously than other cops in the squadron, but we'll get to that quickly. Because the following morning, Lieutenant Colonel Halt read the blotters. The security police desk blotter is a record of all the activity by cops on the base in the last 24 hours. And the blotter detailed the entire night's record of the lights in the forest, the investigations, and the findings of the patrolmen on the scene. He also encountered a building full of cops laughing about the UFO spotting last night.
I never have believed in little green men.
When the local police finally checked out the landing site around 7 p.m. on the 26th, they were, well, let me put it in the vernacular of the Suffolkshire men, not impressed. This should have been the end of this until later in the evening on the 26th, they came back. Around 9:30 p.m., the on-duty security police notified Lieutenant Colonel Halt at a command holiday party. Somewhere in the intervening 18 hours, this shit has gotten serious because you are pulling the deputy base commander out of a fucking party at 9:30 p.m. for a UFO sighting. Now, I knew a lot of United States Air Force security police officers in the military rank sense, and they were not known for being particularly brave or risk-seeking. As a rule, most were at best washed-out pilots pissed off they didn't make flight school and doing their minimum service time until they could get the fuck out of the military, and they were not the kind of people who will risk bothering the brass with some bullshit, much less calling them out of a fucking Christmas party because exactly what they thought would happen happened. Lieutenant Colonel Halt decided he was going to go out and look for himself what all this bullshit was about. And then he stayed out with the cops until 2:30 a.m. on the 27th and saw nothing. This is a fucking cop commander's nightmare because you do not want the deputy base commander or the base commander or anybody like them nosing around your people late at night because they are going to find out and things and ask questions, which is exactly what happened at 7:30 a.m. on the 27th when the base commander, Colonel Conrad, met with the security police squadron commander, Major Zickler, presumably with some very pointed questions like,
What the fuck is wrong with you people?
An investigation was launched, and interviews were made with the parties involved from the first night, and every fucking Air Force cop to ever wear the badge knows that when the statement forms comes out from the squadron commander's orders,
that's when the cannibalism started.
And so what had started as a squadron joke was now a full-on fucking incident. So, Colonel Halt visited the landing site on the day of the 27th, quoting from his memo again, quote, "The next day, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, 29 December 1980, the area was checked for radiation. Beta, gamma readings of 0.1 milliroentgens were recorded with peak readings in the 3 depressions at near the center of the triangle formed by the depressions. A nearby tree had moderate 0.05 to 0.07 on the side of the tree towards the depressions," unquote. By 2 a.m. the following morning of December 28th, there's a lot of date confusions in these memos, which will be addressed next week, Halt and the other investigators were still working the incident when the real action starts. Back to his memo, quote, "Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were about 10 degrees off the horizon. The objects moved rapidly in sharp angular movements and displayed red, green, and blue lights. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned into full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 to 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraph 2 and 3, unquote. What isn't mentioned in the memo is that Halt was actively tracking the object on the ground and was in 2-way radio communication with the Air Force cops, which was monitored by the base commander, Colonel Conrad, and perhaps most importantly, recorded by Halt on a small cassette recorder.
What the hell is that?
It's a thing we used before we did everything on their phone. Halt's recording would detail the second sighting and the efforts of those on the ground to determine what the fuck they were seeing.
0148, we're hearing very strange sounds out of the farmer's barnyard animals. They're just very, very active, making an awful lot of noise.
Yeah, been a pigmentation.
You just saw a light where? Wait a minute, slow down. Where?
Right in this position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flashlight there, sir. There it is.
Hey, I see it too. What is it?
We don't know, sir.
So can I get some of it? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. It looks to be out maybe a quarter to half mile, maybe further out. I'm going to switch off it. The light is gone now. It was approximately 120 degrees from the site. Is it back again?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's the flashlight set. Let's move out to the edge of the clearing so we can get a better look at it. See if you can get the star scope on it. The light's still there, and all the barnyard animals have gotten quiet now. Yeah, we're heading about 110 to 120 degrees from the site out through to the clearing now. Still getting a reading on the meter. About 2 clicks. Meter's jumped 3 to 4 clicks, getting stronger.
Now it's coming up. Hold up. There we go. It's about approximately 4 foot off the ground. It's coming setting to 110 degrees.
All right, just turn the meter off. You gotta say that again. About 4 feet off the ground, about 110 degrees, getting a reading of about 4 clicks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but
Excuse me. No, it's dying.
No, it's not. I think it's something other than the ground. I think it's something variable here.
Tree right over.
We just frightened the first night bird we've seen. We're about 150 or 200 yards from the site. Everything else is just deathly calm. There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead.
There's yellow.
I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird. It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been.
Yellow.
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. Pieces of it are shooting off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird.
Other witnesses in the vicinity at that time confirmed they saw a light in the area, but none of them could corroborate the description of Halt and his team, who were much further out. It was not until roughly 4 a.m. on the morning of the 28th the lights stopped and the sighting was considered to be over. Everything I have told you up to this point is documented fact, meaning it's supported by primary sources in the form of SP blotters, Halt's recordings, memos, and the signed statements to the security police who responded and their supervisors, including the officers in charge of the shift. They established that lights were in fact seen on the morning of the 26th in Rendlesham Forest. They established that broken tree branches and 3 depressions in the ground were documented in photographs, and that elevated radiation levels were in fact recorded in the area of those broken branches and depressions. The people involved in this were sober, professional, military officers and enlisted persons who, by the very nature of their assignments, were considered to be reliable and honest, including the deputy commander of the base, a man with a long military career behind him and prospects of future promotion. No one involved had any motivation to
some shit up, you know?
And genuine reason to think this was a serious incident. And this incident was investigated, not just by the security police and the base command, but the Air Force Office of Special Investigations looked into the sighting as well. The Royal Air Force Liaison Commander, local police, and the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense were notified of the matter, and records indicate there was some follow-up reports, but nothing was substantiated. Officially, the incident was noted, documented, and declared to be a collision of a few separate incidents and the Yanks not knowing geography, as will be detailed in Part 2. And the entire thing became the source of just a good ball-busting on post for those who saw the lights, and officially a nothing burger. That's the way it stayed until the rumors started to spread, and the story took a turn, a darker turn, a turn towards the sort of places and realms that
Agents Mulder and Scully, FBI,
would investigate. As documented by Dr. David Clark, a reporter, professor, an open government advocate with broad experience credibly investigating incidents such as the Rendlesham Forest incident, reports on his website, quote, "Nevertheless, within months of the incident in January of 1981, rumors about a UFO landing at the base leaked out to civilian ufologists, along with the story that an unidentified flying object had been tracked by RAF radars. During 1982, when the protest against American cruise missiles at RAF Greenham Common was underway, the Ministry of Defense began to receive letters asking if the UFO story had been spread to conceal a military accident involving a missile or aircraft. Despite increasing pressure, the Ministry of Defense refused to discuss the contents of Halt's memo until 1983, when the contents of his memo, released under the American Freedom of Information Act, was splashed across the front page of the News of the World. By that time, the sensational stories had begun to emerge from United States Air Force personnel who claimed they were present at the second UFO landing in the forest when contact had taken place between the base commander, Colonel Conrad, and the occupants of the UFO. They claimed that threats had been made against airmen who witnessed these events and a cover-up was underway, unquote. Additionally, the people who saw the initial landing have, shall we say, expanded their original story since the time of the original sighting.
That's a nice way of putting it.
In the extended universe of this incident, the story is quite a bit different, beginning with the night of the initial sighting on the 26th of December, when after receiving permission to leave the base, Peniston and Burroughs left their weapons with cabin sag, as would have been required by the regulation, at the east gate, and together they walked into the forest. And as they followed the light, both witnessed the landed craft, triangle-shaped vessel on 3 landing struts in the trees, emitting a soft, warm light. Peniston approached the craft close enough to see strange hieroglyphic-style writings on the exterior of the craft, and then he touched it, and the craft was warm. He further then received a telepathic download in binary code, which he documents in his patrol notebooks in the days following the incident. Burroughs says that under hypnotic regression, he recalls he and Peniston were actually taken on board the craft, and when they returned to cabin sack At the gate, 45 minutes had elapsed from the time they had entered the trees, and they had been out of radio contact the entire time. This, the men say, was why the incident was escalated to the level of the base command, as a search was initiated by the other members of the security police that night, including their flight chief and flight commander, which would be protocol in the event they were both out of communication for any appreciable length of time. A search which could not locate the two missing men in a fairly small area. Both have claimed that they reported the incident just as I laid it out to their superiors and were told to omit any reference to the craft or being taken aboard in their statements, or they would be punished for dereliction of duty if they stuck with that story, since they clearly had to be out fucking around with their radios off for the better part of an hour. Well, I don't know, maybe they popped around the pub for a pint or something. And that might have stayed the story until the lights were sighted again the following night by different people, and Lieutenant Colonel Halt was notified because now they were believed by their command. Both now say that subsequent investigations into their sighting and what Lieutenant Colonel Halt witnessed on the 28th were covered up by the U.S. military, the Ministry of Defense, and of course, the CIA. They claim that they were administered truth drugs by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations while interrogated, and then ordered by multiple levels of the chain of command to never speak of the incidents or else.
Oh yeah? Well, what are you going to do about it?
Discharge, dishonorable discharge, time in Leavenworth, things like that. Lieutenant Colonel Halt, when he retired in the 1990s, revised his story of the sighting to include multiple craft seen and, yes, orders to downplay what had happened in his memo, officially documenting the incident. Halt has since appeared at UFO conferences and in paranormal media, claiming that what he saw that night was clearly not of earthly origin, and supporting the claim of a cover-up by the US and UK agency. Halt wrote a doorstop of a book that is widely acclaimed as the definitive source on the incident by the kind of people who want to believe, and, quote, a disjointed, fragmented meander through ufology and myth with very little actual information by those who've actually read the fucking book.
I don't need an editor.
Halt, Burroughs, and Peniston are now on the UFO circuit, speaking at conventions and on podcasts. Halt has his book. Burroughs actually filed for and won a claim against the Veterans Affairs, saying that the health effects from radiation stemmed from the incident impacted his health, which is not an affirmation of the version of events, but Burroughs claims it is on his Facebook page, Justice for the Bentwaters 81st Security Police at Rendlesham Forest, 1980. And Peniston, well, remember what I told you about the binary code he received from the craft? People decoded the message that was given to Peniston. Peniston, who did not know binary code, especially not in 1980, and it read roughly this.
Exploration of humanity, continuous planetary advancement.
And then a series of coordinates for places like the Great Pyramids of Giza, the Nazca Lines, and the Temple of Apollo, and a Carl's Jr. outside of Barstow, California, but that might just be something I made up.
But it's credible.
And there is the story of the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident as it transpired, as it is told today. Speaking as an ex-Air Force cop, there's a lot in this story that sounds familiar, and a lot that sounds to me as an ex-Air Force cop credible, because that's how it would have gone down 7 years later when I became security police. It's a story with believable witnesses, extensively documented in primary sources and corroborated by some physical evidence and even a contemporary recording made during the actual sighting. It is considered in the UFO world to be perhaps the most credible UFO sighting to date. If you left the subsequent embellishments out of it, it might even be believable to you, pod friends, never having actually been an Air Force cop. But to me, who was not there, but has gone on ghost hunts in the dark looking for strange lights, I have my own ideas about what the fuck went down that night. And I'm not alone. And that is where we will pick back up next week in Rendlesham Part 2, Bentwaters Boogaloo, as the Spooktacular 2020 continues.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you spent 2 hours in the freezing night chasing a lighthouse, what the hell were you thinking? I am your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 285, Rendlesham Part 2, Bentwater's Boogaloo, where we shine a light on what really happened in the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. Spooktacular 2020 concludes right now, if you just stay tuned. Well, what the hell are you thinking, podcast is brought to you by the Suffolk Lighthouse Preservation Society, dedicated to keeping lighthouses intact for all the students of the Suffolk Lighthouse Academy. Yeah, we know that global positioning and radio have rendered having a big old light in the dark, easily hidden by the constant fog and rain along the Channel Coast, seem a bit silly, but have you ever seen a bleeding lighthouse, all lit up and spooky in the night? It's marvelous. The Suffolk Lighthouse Preservation Society urges you to donate and lobby your politicians to keep lighthouses open and lit, because honestly, being around people scares us, and if you ever met any of us who work in a lighthouse, you would be scared of us. Being in that lighthouse is probably best for everyone involved. Besides, who'd keep the Yanks fumbling around in the dark like we could? The Suffolk Lighthouse Preservation Society. Think of all the photos you took.
All right, Beatrice. There was no alien. Flash of light you saw in the sky was not a UFO. Swamp gas from a weather balloon was trapped in a thermal pocket and refracted the light from Venus.
Well, wait a minute. So you just flash that thing, it erases her memory, and you just make up a new one?
A standard issue neuralizer.
And that weak story is the best you can come up with.
There used to be this joke that went, if you put an Air Force cop in a room with nothing but 3 ball bearings, he would break one, lose one, and steal the other.
Thank me for my service.
This is entirely unfair and utterly mean-spirited, but not exactly wrong. I said last week, and I'll say again, that being an Air Force cop is a really fucking boring job, and you find ways to fill up the empty hours on your shift just any way you can. Sometimes the things you find are not smart or legal. Like the 2 guys, and it's always 2 guys, who decided they were going to tear down the engine on their patrol vehicle one night, only not to be able to get it back together in time for shift change. Or there was a young airman on the back gate who decided he would pass his long night doing a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, only to have the base commander pull up and wait to have his ID checked in the middle of the night, see the young fellow, notice what he was doing, get out of his car, step inside the gate shack, and start handing the oblivious young airman pieces of the puzzle that matched what he was working on. I know that might sound funny to you, but I assure you the base commander wasn't laughing, and neither was the airman when he lost his stripe a few weeks later.
That was you, wasn't it?
It was not me. I don't like doing jigsaw puzzles. Why is it like this? Well, Air Force cops are young people, and young people sometimes make bad choices. And a lot of the time, they will try to lie their way out of those bad choices. Like the young airman who was stone cold busted by a sergeant coming out of his girlfriend's dorm room, sweaty, disheveled, trying to get his uniform buttoned up and his gun belt back on at the same time. That young airman brazenly told his sergeant that he was desperately needing to take a shit, and this was the closest place he could find to get a toilet.
That had to be you.
Yeah, it was. Thank God my girlfriend was listening to the door and had time to duck in the bathroom and light a couple of matches to make it smell like someone had taken a dump. Sometimes the lies work. Not because they're believed so much, it's just less work to accept the lie than finding out a truth that you really don't want to find out, because if you found out, it would be even more work on your part. And sometimes Air Force cops will even engage in elaborate cover-ups to hide their participation in activities or lies. Like the time someone got very drunk and broke a shit ton of drop ceiling tiles in their barracks hallway, resulting in the destruction of government property report being filed that night. That airman broke into a condemned barracks, stole a bunch of ceiling tiles in the middle of the night, and replaced every single one of the damaged tiles before the first sergeant could get around to coming over to investigate the incident and take that dumbass into custody for doing the deed. Everyone knew who did it, but now there was no evidence that anything was done or of how it might have been undone.
Wow, you really are a piece of work.
Those are just the stories I'm comfortable telling you that I know the statute of limitations has ran out on. All of this brings me back to the night of December 26th through the 28th, 1980s, in the Rendlesham Forest just outside the perimeter of RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. If you haven't heard part 1 of the Rendlesham Forest incident, I'm not going to recap it all for you. Your job is to listen to the shows, so go back and check that out. But if you need a quick TLDR, just go with...
I'm going to treat it like a UFO sighting.
I will, however, recap our cast of characters. You've got Airman First Class John Burroughs, who first saw the lights, Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston, and Airman First Class Cabin Sack, who saw the lights in the woods on the 26th and walked into the woods to investigate that night. Peniston and Burroughs claim to have seen an actual craft. And you have Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander, who investigated the evidence of the landing on the 26th, later on the 27th and 28th, recorded what he described as landing impressions and radiation, and he also made a little tape of him chasing a UFO around in the woods on the morning of the 28th, and subsequently wrote a memo detailing the entire incident for the U.S. Air Force, the Royal Air Force, and the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense. Officially, whatever happened in that forest over those couple of nights was investigated and deemed a nothing burger. But unofficially, it has become one of the biggest UFO cases in all the annals of ufology. All because an Air Force cop got caught fucking around, lied about it, and then tried to cover it up.
How do you know this?
I don't know, but when you start picking at the story, it's the explanation that best fits the facts as they were established in 1980, which is the only version of the story that can be substantiated in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Let's start with Airman Burroughs. Being an Airman First Class, John Burroughs would have no more than 3 years in the service, assuming he hadn't been busted down in any ranks, and he hadn't, and perhaps could have as little time as 18 months. It's 3 a.m. the day after Christmas, and chances are Burroughs was in a Ben Folds song.
6 a.m. day after Christmas, I throw some clothes on in the dark. The smell of cold, car seat is freezing, the world is sleeping, I am.
Burroughs was, we assume, his first time away from home for the holidays. That doesn't really have much bearing on the case, but it could give you insights into his frame of mind. He's tired, he's bored, he's trying to find a way to keep awake until shift change 3 hours away. That's when he sees something, a bright light which appears to be falling into the forest. Being a good airman, he reports what he saw on the radio, and Staff Sergeant Peniston and Airman Cabin Sack come out to investigate. When they arrive, they see a light in the forest, and they all go to investigate.
What did they see?
Let's start with the object appearing to descend into the forest. UK reporter Ian Ridpath has investigated this incident extensively, and I will be drawing from his website heavily. His finding on what Burroughs saw that night go thusly. Quote, British Astronomical Association Meteor Section, newsletter number 4, dated 1981 February, contains a brief report on the fireball that apparently sparked the Rendlesham Forest incident. The BAA report notes that this fireball was seen at 0250 Universal Time plus or minus 5 minutes on Boxing Day in 1980 by 4 witnesses, locations not given, but seemingly in southern England. In that bare information lies the genesis of one of the most celebrated UFO cases of all time. Given the coincidence of timing, it seems that the 3 a.m. fireball is what the security guards saw and misinterpreted. So it is important to realize that nothing came down in the Rendlesham forest. Critically, though, the security guards thought that something had come down, so they went out into the forest expecting to find it. Hence, they would have been in a state of mind to misinterpret any unknown light, unquote. Another Air Force cop, Richard Bertolino, told an interviewer in 2009 that he was on duty the night of the original incident on December 26, 1980, and saw that night, around the time that it happened, what to him was clearly a meteor fireball, and then later on remembers the calls coming across the radio about a UFO. So, Peniston, Burroughs, and maybe Cabinsack, the statements differ on exactly who went where and what and saw what in the woods. They all went in looking for what they termed at the time to be a downed aircraft.
Look, I know this sounds crazy, but...
Look, I guarantee you, someone out there before they walked into the woods was already talking about it being a UFO. Why? Because it was the middle of the night in a place where no aircraft were flying, and because a UFO is a lot more fun to go look for than a downed airplane. Again, I have to keep pointing out how fucking boring it is being an Air Force cop and the lengths they will go to for entertainment. Once in the woods, Peniston and Burroughs see the light. A reddish yellow light that appeared and disappeared seemingly at random in the fog. Low to the ground, it seemed to shift and move as if under some intentional control.
What the fuck is that?
No one could come up with an answer for it that night, but then none of the people involved were from that part of Suffolk. If they had been from Suffolk near Ipswich, they would have known exactly what they were looking at.
The lighthouse.
Now you see why I've been making lighthouse jokes for 2 episodes. It was a lot of build-up for very, very little payoff. Ian Ridpath discovered this information back in 1983. We needed a story on the sighting for the Guardian newspaper. Quote, I went in search of local opinions about the case. I made contact by telephone with a forester, Vince Thurkettle, who lives within a mile of the alleged UFO landing site, though he now lives in Norfolk. Immediately, I was brought down to earth. I don't know anyone around here who believes that anything strange happened that night, he told me. So what did he think the flashing white was in Rendlesham Forest? I was astonished by his reply. It's a lighthouse, he said. That lighthouse lies at Orford Ness on the Suffolk coast, 5 miles from the forest. Thurkettle plotted on the map the direction in which the airmen reported seeing their flashing UFO and found that they were looking straight into the lighthouse beam, unquote. Ridpath then took a camera crew out to Rendlesham Forest and met up with his local, and sure enough, quote, sure enough, the lighthouse beam seemed to hover a few feet above ground level because the Rendlesham Forest is higher than the coastline. The light seemed to move around as we moved, and it looked close, only a few hundred yards away among the trees. All of this matched the airman's description of the UFO.
That is disappointing.
But wait, Dave, I hear you saying, what about the craft Peniston and Burroughs saw in the woods? Surely that was no light from the lighthouse. Peniston even sketched it out in his notebook and swore to it in his statement from the time. What do you say to that, Mr. Skeptic Man?
Big important science man, so prim and proper.
Peniston's statement from the night of the 26th said he was about 60 feet or so from Burroughs when he saw the object in the distance at about 50 meters. That's about 150 feet. In dense, foggy conditions. The object was illuminated at just above ground level and intermittently with red and blue lights at 5 to 10 second intervals. Clearly, nothing could explain something like red and blue lights flashing like that but a UFO.
A police car.
Yeah, exactly the kind of emergency strobes on top of a security police vehicle at Bentwaters Woodbridge in 1980. Again, from Ridpath's website, quote, in the summer of 2003, a former United States Air Force military policeman at Woodbridge, Kevin Conde, claimed on television and in the press that the Rendlesham Forest UFO case was sparked by a practical joke he staged in his police car to frighten the guard at the East Gate. It was fertile ground for a practical joke, and practical jokes are a tradition in the security police, Conde explained. There was this one guy at the back gate, and he was known as a bit of a problem. He was always seeing things. Conde told the Daily Mail. It always turned out that it was a star or something. So I decided to play a practical joke. I drove down the taxiway in my car. I stuck the spotlight on after sticking red and green lenses on it. Then I drove around in circles in the fog with the PA loudspeakers going, flashing my lights. It wasn't a UFO. It was a 1979 Plymouth Volare, a standard issue American police car. Conde says that he drove along the Woodbridge runway, whereas the lights reported by the security guards were in the forest. Additionally, Conde was not evidently aware when he made his claim that sightings stretched over 2 nights and involved the lights that were nowhere near the airbase. However, Conde did provide one significant clue when he noted it was a good stunt. Someone else may have repeated it. In fact, most good cop practical jokes did get repeated, unquote. And boy, did they ever. Practical jokes on post were a great fucking way to pass the time, and they were usually at the expense of the new guys, which both Peniston and Burroughs were at the time. At my first base, it was common practice to take new troops out to an old cemetery and instruct them to go out and do a visibility check. The senior person on patrol would instruct the new guy to leave his weapon in the truck and walk out about 100 feet into the graveyard and wave his flashlight over his head. And that's when the other cops would pop out from behind headstones making spooky noises and sending the new guy screaming back to the truck for his gun, while everyone laughed and laughed and laughed.
Oh, yeah, ha, 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 real funny, man.
And the jokes, as juvenile as they sound, often involve senior NCOs who planned and coordinated things for maximum effect. It wasn't unusual to have 5 or 6 people who really ought to know better involved in these pranks, and sometimes they got out of hand. Like the one night at my first base, a nuke base, a red light ghost chase, meaning someone was fucking around with a red lens on their flashlight in the alert nuclear aircraft parking area, damn near caused a full base recall to sweep the nuclear alert parking ramps for the ghost. The captain in charge of the shift was fucking furious when she found out because she was so close to making the call for a full response. So yeah, do I think the first night was a combination of seeing strange lights and someone fucking around with the new guys Peniston and Burrow, be it Conde or someone else? Abso-fucking-lutely. I think this is what happened, and unfortunately for everyone involved, it got out of hand, which brings us to Lieutenant Colonel Halt, because nothing good ever comes out of getting the officers involved. Let's listen to Colonel Halt explain what happened in his own words from a History Channel documentary.
My name is Colonel Charles Halt. In 1980, I was the Deputy Base Commander at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, England. At that time, Bentwaters was the largest tactical fighter wing in the free world, and our mission as a key NATO installation was to be prepared should anything happen. Early in the morning of the 26th of December, I went in to collect the police blotters. That's the chronological list of what happened the previous 24 hours. And as I walked into the office, the on-duty desk sergeant started to laugh. He said, "Colonel, you're not going to believe this. Last night, 3 of our policemen were out in the forest chasing UFOs. They called in and thought they saw a downed aircraft. They went out and investigated, and they had some type of an experience." I said, "Well, put something into the blotter to the effect that they saw some lights, and we'll leave it at that for now."
That desk sergeant ought to be fucking slapped, because what had been up until this point had been a pretty good joke, now became a problem. Because now, you gotta put it in the blotter. Speaking from experience, if something goes in the blotter, it officially happened. So, whenever possible, you work really, really hard to keep shit out of the blotter. Halt having this put in the blotter did make a certain kind of sense. After all, U.S. forces went off base to investigate in the British territory. The local police were notified of the incident shortly after it happened, so Halt probably decided to include it just to cover asses. But then, lights were seen again on the night of the 26th, and someone had to make some decision, and that someone was the lieutenant in charge of the shift, the person that should never be making decisions ever. And the lieutenant decided to go see Halt at the Christmas party, which resulted in nothing being found, probably because the weather was clear and the visibility is good, but now this was a serious thing. In a 2010 interview with journalist David Clark, Colonel Conrad, the base commander, details what transpired between the night of the 26th and the night of the 27th going into the morning of the 28th. Quote, "Frankly, at this point, Lieutenant Colonel Halt and I were discussing what level of involvement was required from my office. We knew that silence would likely lead to allegation of cover-up. With the rumor mill already operating, it was a matter of time before the press got the story. We did not want the press to report the appearance of misinformation or cover-up. We decided that a brief in-house investigation was in order. If we could find any credible evidence to justify a request for more high-tech investigators, then we would be in a position to pass the entire episode on to the British authorities. If any meaningful evidence were not found, we would document that fact, close the entire episode by providing our facts to authorities in a low-key manner. Events dictated the latter approach. The rest of December 27, 1980 saw Lieutenant Colonel Halt assemble our meager assets. This were a Geiger counter, a starlight scope, a night vision device, and a trained SP investigator out at the site in Rendlesham Forest. The investigation lasted until late in the evening when the site was starlight scoped, after which we all went home except Lieutenant Colonel Halt and some unknown security police. This was the night of Halt's famous audio tape, unquote. Nothing Halt saw on the night of the 27th and the morning of the 28th cannot be explained simply and succinctly. I go back to Ian Ridpath. Quote, he took radiation readings, which were background levels. He saw a flashing light in the direction of Orford Nest, but was unable to identify it. Colonel Halt reported seeing star-like objects that twinkled and hovered for hours like stars. The brightest of these, which at times appeared to send down beams of light, was in the direction of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. At its most basic, the case comes down to a misinterpretation of a series of nocturnal lights, a fireball, a lighthouse, and some stars. Such misidentifications are standard fare for ufology. It is only the concatenation of three different stimuli that makes it exceptional, unquote. The landing marks on the ground were where rabbits had scraped to sleep the night. The gash marks on the trees and down branches, foresters culling marks on the trees suitable for clearing, and the radiation was exactly the levels you would find in normal readings in that area, and the lights were lighthouses and stars.
Pretty standard, really.
So why did Halt think he saw a UFO? Well, Halt was neither a pilot nor a combat officer. He was amped up on what he considered credible statements by troops he trusted. He's in the woods at night and starts seeing the lighthouse, which he has no frame of reference to know is a lighthouse. He sees physical evidence that seems to support what he's being told by witnesses and sees the Geiger counter ticking where it logically shouldn't be, according to his expert. I haven't seen any evidence that Halt was involved in radiological work or the people that were with him were, but he does have a degree in chemistry, so who knows? And also, according to Ridpath, their Geiger counter wasn't even the kind intended for doing the kind of work they were using it for that night. Quote, my earlier inquiries had shown that the radiation monitor used by Halt and his team would have been of the type known as the ANPDR-27. On behalf of Frank Close, the NRPB contacted the American manufacturer of the ANPDR-27, who stated that Halt's peak measurements of 0.1 was the bottom reading on the lowest range of the monitor, and it was of little or no significance. They noted further that these instruments are designed to be used to monitor workplace fields or radiation levels after a sizable nuclear incident and are therefore not suitable for environmental monitoring at background levels, unquote. But if you hear the clicks going on at a Geiger counter when you've grown up with the associations of Geiger counters like Halt clearly had, you're going to hear it and start getting nervous. None of this discredits Halt, who seems to legitimately believe he encountered something that night, but nothing he encountered that night cannot be explained with just perfectly normal observations of perfectly normal events. And Halt was missing one critical piece of information that would have changed his entire perception of the night, and that's how Air Force cops routinely fucking try to lie their way out of trouble. And before you get your panties all up in a twist and start saying, how dare I besmirch the honor of the United States Air Force and the security forces career field, fuck you. You obviously never have been a fucking Air Force cop and probably have never been in the military, because I was a troop and I lied to my supervisors. I was a supervisor and my troops lied to me. We all lied to the flight chief, and the flight chief lied to the lieutenants and who was shift commanders, and the shift commanders lied to the ops officer, and the ops officer lied to the commander who was the chief of security police, and the chief of security police lied to the base commander. The base commander lied to the wing commander. The wing commander lied to the numbered Air Force commander. The numbered Air Force commander lied to the major command commander, and the major command commander lied to the joint chiefs of staff, who lied to the secretary of defense, who lied to the president, and the president lies to the people. That's how shit gets done in the military. Halt's memo, completed some 2 weeks after the incident, already contains some inaccuracies as to dates and times and definitely displays witness creep, where the witnesses of events start adding elements taken from other sources other than their own recollection. Again, this is normal. It's widely known, and it is an attack on Halt. Colonel Conrad, in his 2010 interview with David Clark, summarized the event thusly. Quote, "After all that, we found no hard evidence. In my judgment, further investigation would likely gain us nothing but notoriety. We summed up what we had, and Lieutenant Colonel Halt composed a letter to the wing commander, Don Moreland, the British base commander, RAF liaison officer, who was away on leave during the Christmas holiday, leaving it up to him if he thought it was necessary to forward any of the information onto the Ministry of Defense. It was my intention to suggest that we would be happy if the whole thing died there. There were no conspiracies, no secret operations, no missile accident, and no harsh interrogations by the OSI. If I have any regrets, it's I should have challenged Lieutenant Colonel Halt's account of the events on the night of 28 December. However, since I wanted to avoid the appearance of shaping the story, I was reluctant to require any changes to his letter to Don Moreland." Unquote. What happened at Bentwaters was just really bad luck for a lot of fucking people. I firmly believe that the first night was cops fucking around playing jokes on each other that got blowed up real good when the base brass got involved. I believe people started trying to bullshit their way out of it and only succeeded in making things worse, and then a bunch of people spooked themselves into chasing ghosts in the woods at night. Nothing in the primary and secondary documents support any other conclusion. The base commander basically says this is what he thinks in his interview with Clark. Quote, "The search for an explanation could go many places, including the perpetration of a clever hoax." Unquote. And it just fucking fits with everything I know about Air Force cops from the time and presumably today. It just feels right. And if it feels right and matches the evidence, you have at least a plausible explanation for what happened that Christmas in Suffolk. What about the other shit? The missing time, coded messages, strange flying lights, radar sightings. By the way, there were no actual radar sightings. Do not believe what you read in UFO blogs. Ridpath and Clark both confirmed there were no radar contacts on the night in question. Why do Peniston and Burroughs and Halt all now maintain there were crafts, cover-ups, and conspiracies? Well, all of those claims start about a decade after the sighting in 1980, just when the world was coming into a new spate of UFO fever. Starting in the mid-1980s, UFOs came roaring back into the pop culture zeitgeist.
Quite a little vocabulary he has there.
As mass media expanded and it became easier for people to create their own content, UFOs and UFO conspiracies fit neatly into the narrative of government distrust that came roaring out of the 70s because you couldn't trust the government. Cable television needed shows to fill the expanded schedules, and the UFO documentaries were cheap to make and got good ratings. By the 1990s, there was a full-on UFO economy. Books, magazines, lecture circuits, television appearances. You weren't going to get rich on the UFO circuit, but you could make a little money and get a little fame. And then along came the X-Files in 1993, and shit blew up. You didn't need to believe in little green men to embrace the culture of UFOs the same way you don't need to dress up like the Green Lantern to go to Comic-Con. And then came the internet, and that's when we really started to see the Rendlesham extended universe blossom. We got binary messages, missing times, conspiracy theories, truth serum, government cover-ups, none of which were talked about by the witnesses prior to the mid-1990s and the early 2000s. Am I saying Halt, Peniston, and Burroughs and the rest just started making shit up to cash in on their narrow window of fame and fortune? No!
You kind of are.
Okay, yes, I am, but I'm not saying they're intentionally lying about it. They remember these things happening because that's what the brain does. It takes little pieces of what happened and over the years superglues subsequent events, feelings, external information onto those memories until your brain is convinced you saw a UFO that gave you a message in binary code with the fucking coordinates for Sedona fucking Arizona. And if you can make a few $100 talking about it, well, what's the harm? But to me, ex-Air Force Security Police Senior Airman Bledsoe, military working dog handler, slacker, layabout, and consummate bullshitter, this story was never about UFOs and aliens. It was, and always will be, a cautionary tale about letting on-post pranks get out of hand and letting officers get involved in anything. The second Lieutenant Colonel Halt decided to investigate this, people went into ass-covering mode from the bottom to the top of the cop shop. Things were embellished. Lies were told. Cover stories manufactured and statements carefully crafted to admit nothing, deny everything, and make counter-accusations in the finest tradition of the defenders of the forest. One ball bearing got broken, one ball bearing got lost, and one ball bearing was in the pocket of someone who didn't own said ball bearing. The base chain of command likely figured this out a few days later and likely constructed a story of their own to minimize the stupidity of everyone involved and avoid embarrassing the wing, the base, the United States Air Force, hoping it would all go away. Rumors started leaking. Politics unrelated to UFOs got involved, and the story mutated into the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident we know today. After people left the service, they liked the attention and maybe the little bit of money, so they started telling versions designed to please their audience. Voila, you have the story that I have told you in 2 parts this month. And no matter what, those ball bearings ain't never coming back.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samara Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samara Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samara. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samara Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
That is it for the Redux Megamix. We are busy right here at the Podcast Hut, prepping this year's Spooktacular. It's all about...
Well, yeah, witches. Witches.
When you come back next week, and we know you will come back next week because we put a curse on you via the RSS feed to compel you to listen. We kick off Spooktacular 2025 with the origins of witches, which in my case, of course, was when I met my first wife at a Motley Crue concert in the late 1980s.
Nah, that's a cheap joke. I'm sorry, that was a cheap joke, and I'm better than that. No, I'm not.
So follow us, rate us, review us, wherever you get your pods. Kick us $1 to keep our cauldron full at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast, and do all the things that Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, he's going to kick us out of the coven, y'all. So for me, Dave, you've got to pick up every stitch. Let's so, producer.
There is no such thing as witches.
Gavin, and all the fictional little gray aliens on this podcast, we want to say that it truly must be the season of the witch. And we'll see you all next week for Spooktacular 2025.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
For witches!
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.